down this uprising, sort of a little reminiscent of what happened within the weeks after September 11th. Had thousands of Arab Americans were arrested, and we'll get into that a little bit too. Again, under the auspices of the Patriot Act as well. So these elections that took place in March of 1933, right after the Reichstag fire, what happened was with the Enabling Act, they were able to start to, go after, cut down civil rights and go after all the people who were in opposition to the German government, and then
make dramatic public arrests.
Absolutely, and show that they were tough on crime, and they were going to cut down on the communist conspiracy, etc. And with that act, with the elections only 2 weeks later, Hitler won, but he still didn't win a majority. He did not win a majority of the vote, but he didn't care. He just declared himself chancellor, called it the, quote, Nazi revolution, quote, a union between old greatness and youthful strength, built up an emotional response from the German people, whipped them up in fear and frenzy to get support to overthrow this, Bolshevik conspiracy, and to support this, quote, act, enabling him to then rule by decree. And then by that decree, then, it was supposed to be authorized by the Reichstag, by the German parliament, but by using the Enabling Act, they were able to bully and coerce people into supporting it. But 94 Social Democrats did bravely vote against it. 24 of them were then subsequently murdered shortly after the vote. The rest eventually were driven from power. Most of them became the first residents of Dachau, which was opened later that year. So anyway, there is that history of how a national crisis is used as an example to then allow a government to use patriotism to initiate rules and regulations that then prevent them from being...
I think there are probably plenty of people who would say it's really a big exaggeration to make this comparison, but they need to keep in mind that there has been an overwhelming evolution in the science of propaganda and in the science of control of people since then. And people who are interested in controlling the population have realized now that they don't have to control every single thing. They can pick what they want to control and what matters, and they can leave the rest there as a sort of an illusory shell that people have their rights intact.
Right. And you're right, Ed. We don't want to get off on like an inflammatory rhetoric by saying like the Enabling Act is just like the Patriot Act or anything like that. But there's a lot of those types of similarities inherent in its origination, and also the fact that it through a legislation, suspended constitutionally guaranteed civil rights of the German people, and then Hitler just used that as like, well, we have to do this to fight, at that time, the communists, who were the major threat, terrorist communists.
If people think back to the time immediately following the attacks of September 11th, what the national mood was, a number of things were going on. One, people were willing to work together and suspend a lot of political differences for what they perceived to be the need of protecting ourselves and preventing further things of this nature. And I think that there were some instances where people suspended their good judgment, and including our elected representatives who voted for this thing in an overwhelming majority. Many of them now regret it.
Right.
But,
And this thing here, the Patriot Act here, again, which we have right here, and I've perused through this thing a few times, and a lot of it's really arcane kind of stuff that's really bureaucratic ease, like Section 60135B changes is to of, in former...
Or refers to previous laws, so that in order to understand it, you would have to do a lot of additional research.
Right. But then what you do have, like the Enabling Act, you do have where this act then suspends certain constitutionally guaranteed rights. Mm-hmm. And what you had, like what you just said, where people, the Patriot Act, within 6 weeks, this thing was rammed through Congress and voted on. A lot of the congressmen were like saying, I felt under pressure. I felt we had to respond to something. There were certain good things in this thing. The terrorists are at the door. It's like we need to do something.
There were people who were vocally questioning the speed of enacting this,
yes.
And who were, in Congress, there
right.
were a couple of senators who later were subject to anthrax attacks in their offices, who were who were opposing the speedy enactment of this without some more thorough reflective review.
Right. There was very few people that voted against it. In the Senate, it passed 99-1. The one dissenting vote was Russ Feingold from Wisconsin, and he's forever has my respect for having done that, because there were certain things in here that he was like, wait, what is this? He happened to bother to read it, and he happened to go, wait, what is Section 213, okay, which is now commonly referred to as the sneak and peek provision, okay? Section 213 basically gives the government the right to come into your house. It doesn't need a warrant. If it thinks that it can say, well, this guy might know this information, or he might be connected to this terrorist organization, it can read your mail, it can come into your house, it can visit your workplace, it can download all your computer files, and it doesn't have to tell you.
The most conservative interpretation of it says that they can execute a warrant on your house without telling you, which means that they can come into your house when you're not home, they can have a warrant, but come into your house when you're not home and do a search of everything in your house.
Right.
Now, previously, if they had a search warrant of your house, they had to inform you prior to the conduct of the search.
Right.
In most instances. This abrogates that.
And if you have any input or insight, somebody has some insight, or particularly if anyone out there has personal experience where they've had to run into an incident where they've been confronted with a situation because of the Patriot Act, whether receiving a summons from the law or something, we'd love to hear from you. Call in, the number here live tonight.
Yeah, any librarians.
We'll have the date up there too.
ISPs out there that have any stories to tell, we'd like to hear those.
April 25th, that's when we're taping this today. So if you're actually watching this live, call in. Yeah, librarians. That's a whole other situation too. Call us up and share your observations on what you think of the Patriot Act or what experiences you might have had with it. But the 213 section is really a concern because, well, basically, that it by law, as just in one little sweeping thing, has abrogated the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution.
Why don't I just read the Fourth Amendment?
The Fourth Amendment, actually, which you can read right here, is the, where do I have
on the screen? Oh, it's right here.
Okay.
And it's on the screen in just a second, or it should be on the screen.
You can read the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. That is the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States from the Bill of Rights, written by James Madison. That was the supreme law of the land until it became abrogated unconstitutionally by the passage of this, and by Section 213, which that section says, oh, you know that Bill of Rights, that Fourth Amendment? Nah, doesn't count.
Well, and other sections as well. So Section 213 with it, but Section 211 requires cable television operators to turn over any information they have about you without the need for any kind of a warrant or without any notification, and that includes your cable-based internet surfing. So if you have cable internet, that means that the government can watch everything you do on the internet.
And it goes into carnivore system, which we'll get into another program as well, which is the FBI system, which they can attach to an ISP saying they're looking for someone's mail. They're looking for, we think that there's somebody here using communication we need to track down. But what the carnivore system does is they attach it to the ISP, and it sucks up all the information going through that ISP, so they can now read the mail of everyone who goes through that internet service provider. But they had to do it to go find this one guy.
Yeah, can we put the last half of the Fourth Amendment back up there again? And particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
Right.
Doesn't exactly fit in with the carnivore system, which is a kind of blanket scooping up of everything.
That would be like saying, there's a guy who lives in this neighborhood we think might be connected with organized terror, and so because of that, we're going to read everyone in this neighborhood's mail day in and day out, and we're going to break into everybody's houses and look. Okay, and the thing is, if I thought the only way you can abrogate a constitutional amendment to change a constitution is through the constitutional conventional process.
Well, a constitutional amendment can be passed that supersedes a previous amendment,
right?
Which means that Congress or that like 2/3